Hey, I'm Wendy, and this is my series, Love, Loss, and Lipstick, part 14. I'm going to get ready for work and tell my love story, and when I finish my makeup, the story will end for today, and I will move this over to my YouTube channel because Facebook will delete it, so you can find all of them there. Last week was a lot, but I was newly pregnant. I joined a pregnant aerobics class, and I met a girl named Regina. I thought we had absolutely nothing in common except for we were both pregnant and in an aerobics class. But we really hit it off, and when we started talking more, getting to know each other, she told me that she was from Nashville, and I'm like, oh, my husband used to live in Nashville, and they were in California. Her husband was doing some research at one of the colleges, and so it was kind of temporary. And somehow in the conversation, she mentioned that her husband was Canadian. I'm like, oh, my husband's Canadian. And then somehow in the conversation, I mentioned that we were Jewish, and she's like, oh, my husband's Jewish. So I thought, wow, for not having anything in common, we really have a lot in common. And our babies were due like maybe a month apart. And so we were in this together, and it started a really nice friendship, and we introduced our husbands to each other, and they hit it off, and we started hanging out. So she had her son in June. Oh, you know what? They were due a week apart. So she had her son, and I was having a girl, only we didn't know, we didn't find out. And she was due June 22nd. And so when it rolled into July, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a month late. Even though I was a week late, I felt like I was a month late. My doctor, my OBGYN, his name was Dr. Ho, and Steve couldn't say it without laughing. Every time he mentioned Dr. Ho, he'd kind of giggle. But anyways, Dr. Ho decided that she was getting pretty big, and so they wanted to induce my labor. And everything went fine. It was pretty quick, and she was born happy, healthy. Everything was really great. So I had pretty much zero experience with a newborn. I had a niece, but my sister was super overprotective, and she really wouldn't let me ever do anything to help take care of her when she was a baby. But Steve was a natural, and so he just jumped right in. I was breastfeeding, and he would get mad at me if I would get up during the night and not wake him up. I'm like, why would I wake you up? He's like, you don't have to do this by yourself, and I can go get her and bring her to you. And I'm like, okay. So he was such a big help with the baby. And after about 8 weeks, I went back to work pretty quick. I should just back up for a second. In California, there's you can get disability and when you're on maternity leave, which is really nice to get paid. And I wanted to have more time after than before. So I was planning on only taking like a week off before she was due, but then she was late. So it ended up that I had more time off before than what I was planning, and I had less time off afterwards, but I had gone back to work pretty quickly, just a few weeks. some of the girls at the salon were planning a trip, a long weekend to Palm Springs, and invited me to go. We had done it several times and it was always such a good time. And so I mentioned it to Steve and he's like, oh, you should go. Go, have fun. And I'll stay home with Marin and we'll be fine. And I was a little bit apprehensive about leaving. I hadn't left her, especially for a weekend. But he really thought I should go and that it would be good. So he said, don't worry, don't call, we're gonna be fine. You go with your friends and have a great time and we'll see you when you get back. So I went. Okay, he really thought that I wasn't gonna call. I mean, even if I didn't have a baby, I would probably call. So I tried calling and got no answer. I'm like, oh, okay, you know, I guess they're out. And I called again, and called again, called again, and called again. And I thought, okay, that's really weird. So I called my mom, because Steve loved spending time at my mom's anyways. So I called my mom. I'm like, hey, you know, is Steve there? And she's like, no, you know, I haven't even heard from him since, you know, whenever. I mean, if we were just going for the weekend, it was probably Friday to Sunday. So this probably is Saturday. So mom's like, no, you know, I haven't heard from him today. And I'm not even sure if I talked to him yesterday. I thought, well, okay. So I called his mom. I'm like, hey, you know, have you heard from Steve? Is he there by any chance? And she's like, no, you know, I haven't talked to him. And I thought, where could he be? And so I was getting a little bit nervous, a lot nervous. And so I let it go for a little bit. I checked with one of his friends. I mean, I checked with anybody and everybody that I could really think of. And I got no answer. And now, you know, it was night. And so I was a little bit freaked out. So I just got in my car and I drove home. And I was so anxious. And so I get home, you know, thinking, I mean, what am I going to walk into? Oh my gosh, have they been murdered or did something happen to him? Or, you know, I just didn't know. But so I get home and nobody's there. They're gone. And the only person that I hadn't called or hadn't thought to call, I don't know if you saw when I was talking about my wedding, Steve had, you know, his other family, his best friend and his best friend's parents were like parents to him. And the mom actually had stood us up, basically stood Steve up at our wedding. She never came out of her hotel room and whatever, and he was so upset about it. But anyways, they lived down near San Diego, and that was the only person I really hadn't checked with. And so I just called because I was having a fit. Yeah, they were there. And I was so mad. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that you were taking her to San Diego? And he said, because I didn't know. He said it was just kind of, you know, impulsive. And I thought, I can't believe you didn't let me know. Like, you take her out of town for the weekend and you're not even going to let me know? And he said, I told you not to call. And I thought, why would you think that I wouldn't call? Of course I'm going to call and check in. He said, I told you to go and have fun. Don't call. Don't worry. So this is your fault. You made the decision to, you know, go home early. I told you we would be fine, and we are fine. Oh my gosh. I was so mad. And then finally he admitted that it probably wasn't a good idea. But I turned it around a little bit and I said, well, you know what? Yeah, you're fine. What if something happened to me? What if I got in an accident? Or what if something happened and I couldn't get a hold of you and nobody knew where you were? So this isn't even about you anymore. Now it's about me. So like I said, I got my apology, but I couldn't believe he did that. And I left my girls' trip early and the whole deal, but he was a very, very involved and father and he took really great care of her. And they were fine, and I'm sure they had a great time. So anyways, we got through that. And right when I found out that I was pregnant, he had started his own business, a production company. He wanted to be able to do his own things. So he had a friend in Nashville when he used to live in Nashville. His name was Rocky. And so he reached out to Rocky, and Rocky introduced him to Teresa over at RCA. And Steve was hired to produce a music video for a country music artist. His name was Aaron Tippin. I never heard of him. I mean, I have now, but at the time, I didn't know anything about country music. They wanted to shoot his video in California, so it made sense for them to hire a production company that was in California, so they didn't have the expense of paying the travel for all of the crew and all of the Nashville people to come. So he went ahead, so he did that music video, and it turned out really well, and everybody was happy. And so he was hoping that maybe there would be more work in country music. And because music videos were really a big thing then. This was like 91. But it didn't really take too long to realize that it was still kind of a good old boys network. And he heard a lot of times like, oh, you know, if you lived here, oh, if you were in Nashville, we could hire you, or, you know. So nothing else really came of that. But he did land a big job that he was super excited about for a division of Disney. Back in the day, some of you might remember, back in the day, they used to have after-school specials. And so this was an after-school special. And apparently, there's a lot of divisions of Disney. It's not just making movies. So this was just a smaller division of Disney. So he was hired to produce this television show. And what that means, the producer is the one in charge of all the money and spending it. So hiring the crew and, you know, the budget, making sure everything stays how it's supposed to stay. And the hiring and the firing and the scheduling and the general contractor, basically. So the executive producer is the person from Disney. That executive producer that's the money person. So this guy, we'll just call him Joe, like Joe Schmo. He was the executive producer. He was coming from Disney with the money. And he told Steve he wanted to be the director. Joe did. And Steve's like, oh, okay. He wasn't really thrilled about that, but he was kind of the boss. And so he said, you know, I want to be the director. The director is the one with the vision of what it's going to look like. So Joe's the director. Well, Joe wanted this many cameras, and Steve said, well, that's not in the budget. You know, we're only going to use this many cameras. And Joe's like, well, I can get it approved. I'll just go back and tell them that, you know, we need more money or whatever. And it was making Steve really uncomfortable. And then, you know, they were going overtime, and then, you know, like in editing, everything was starting to add up. And every time Steve told him no, he would be like, don't tell me no. You know, I'll bring you the money. So needless to say, they went over budget, which made Steve crazy. But Joe was like, okay, you know, give me whatever the overages are, and I'll submit them to be paid. So of course, Steve was the one responsible to, pay the crew. And usually people were like, it was like a 30-day invoice or something after it was over. So Steve kept checking in with Joe, and he's like, no, nothing yet. And he just had a feeling that it was going to end badly. So sure enough, he's like, no. He goes, it didn't get approved. Sorry. It's like, really? We contacted a lawyer thinking, well, maybe we can sue him, because we were responsible as the production company to pay the crew. And we couldn't pay everybody. And so we talked to a lawyer, and he kind of laughed. He's like, seriously, you can't sue Disney. They have so many lawyers on staff that they just get paid to tie these things up in court. And you'll lose everything. I mean, it'll cost, you can't afford to sue them. So that was super disheartening. And Steve was so mad. He's like, we are never supporting Disney anything. And I'm looking, we have a 1-year-old who's, at all the Disney toys and videos and everything. He's like, we will never take her to Disneyland. I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, it was really bad. And we were being sued by one of the crew members was suing us for payment. And I talked to her on the phone. I'm not sure why I talked to her. But I, tried to explain. I'm like, I am so sorry. I said, we didn't get paid either. So I understand. And she's like, well, you need to sell your car. You need to sell whatever you can. And, thinking about it now, she was probably owed, like $200 for a day rate or something. I don't know. But at the time, it wasn't just her. So it was kind of overwhelming. But we didn't have any extra money, and we couldn't pay all these people. We moved into our fancy house. We had a new baby. Steve had an office that he leased, for his business. And there was just lots of expenses, and we didn't see this coming. So we were trying to get through all that, and then it was Marin's first birthday. And so even with all the stress and everything going on, we thought, well, we have to have a little party. And we had the family and some friends and stuff over, and it was really great. We had a great time. And my friend Regina, whose baby was about the same age as Marin, they had a birthday party for their son, I guess the week before. And she told me at the party that they were going to be moving. And I was so sad. Marin and her son, they were each other's first friends as babies, not like, they would know the difference. But she said they were moving back to Nashville because I got mascara all over my face. The grant he was working on had run out or whatever, and it was time for him to move on. And so his next project he was going to be working on was at Vanderbilt. And she was super excited because they were going home for her. And it was happening fast. They were moving like the next month. So it wasn't too much long after they left that Steve was feeling like if he had the reputation of not paying his crew, he's like, I'll never work again in this town. And there was a lot of other things. The whole time that we had been dating and the whole time that we had been married, whenever he would talk about when he lived in Nashville, he'd say things like, oh, when I lived in Nashville, you would hate it there. We used to do blah, 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 blah. Oh, when I lived in Nashville, you could never live there. But we used to, and he was always talking, and I was like brainwashed. I'll hate Nashville. I would hate Nashville. I could never be in Nashville. And so then he's like, well, maybe we should move to Nashville. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But to be honest, as much as I loved living in California and never imagined that I would ever leave, once you have a kid and your priorities start to change, I'm like, is this the life that we want? Not even, barely keeping our heads above water. It was so expensive. Everything was so expensive. And I thought, this is really not the quality of life. We were so stressed out. We didn't have money to do anything. We had these people suing us, and he owed money. And so we talked to a lawyer. We got some really bad advice from a lawyer about filing bankruptcy. We didn't really owe that much. And knowing now what I know now, but we were young and we just didn't know. But we made the decision that Steve was going to go to Nashville and see if he could make a life for us there before I picked up and moved, because he said, I need to have everything perfect before you come, or you're going to resent me, and I'm not going to take you away from your family and your job that you love and all of your friends, and the only place you've lived your whole life. I'm not going to do that and not be able to have you come into it feeling really good. So Barron turned 1 on July 1st. And it was probably like mid-August. And he called his friend Rocky in Nashville, and Rocky flew out, and they loaded up Steve's car with whatever would fit, and they left and went to Nashville. So I will tell you next week what happens next. I'm ready to go to work. Have a great day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next